I can give you some handouts. Maybe you can add to our time or give us something after lunch or something.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Dr. Quinn, I guess it's I'm not so sure he's going to be able to read. So I would just like to talk about I'd like to talk about the certification agencies that are out there already established in the industry. They've already established pretty much the definitions of large, small, and medium-sized wind turbines. If you go by what Intertech and SWCC are certifying, these are the organizations that are sponsored and funded by NREL to come up with a third-party certification and testing mechanism. So AWIA 9.1 is the specification defined to define and test small wind turbines. And under there, you can look it up on the SWCC website. It's defined as a turbine under 50 kilowatts, under 200 square meters, which is basically a 52-foot diameter. And that's kind of where they draw the line. And they had to come up with, and before 2014, they just had one specification, IEC 61400, which basically was everything was large turbines above that. Since then, they see the void, and they've come up with another category called medium wind, which is defined as 200 square meters to 1,000 square meters, and is defined as the power levels. They don't define the power level on it, so it's kind of a blurry area. But they say that to go from a medium turbine to a large turbine, they really consider the criteria of whether you have to go inside the nacelle in order to service it. If you service it from outside the nacelle, they say, well, that's medium. So today, that's what the dividing line is. Now, Vermont has defined small wind turbines in many different ways. There's 100 kilowatts and below is in the standard offer program. You've defined and other things like the net metering program, 150 kilowatts under 150 feet. You have other different categories in your net metering Rule .5.100, which has another category for 50 kilowatts and below. Then you have another area that's 15 kilowatts and below. So all of these things are, everybody has a different definition of small and medium. Okay. So it looks like we're...
Yeah, I'm ready to begin my presentation. I appreciate her helping me out with the internet. I'm sorry this computer died. We'd like to discuss the issue of changing the state wind turbine noise regulations for small wind turbines. This was something I looked at in Massachusetts while I was with DEP. We looked at the wind turbine regulations quite extensively there. This is a complex process involving multiple stakeholders. I think everybody here agrees there's a lot of things going on here. I think there's some agreement with a lot of people that the existing standard of 42 is too high. The proposed is 42 decibels for day, 35 night. These levels, as far as I can tell, would be about the most conservative in New England. And as I stated earlier, that would only be exceeded by a few locations in Massachusetts where it might be lower. I can't think of anything much lower than that. So this would be the most conservative levels in all of New England, much lower than Maine and New Hampshire levels. Measuring criteria we specified, which we agree from DEP is important to understand because there are issues with the measuring criteria not being specified in advance, and people found out that the measurement level criteria were different than what they had modeled, which was a significant issue in Massachusetts. But the most important thing we want to point out here is that the levels that are proposed are the same for large and small turbines. And we want to, in this presentation, show that we do not believe this to be appropriate for a very lengthy list of reasons. I studied this about a lot of this, the issue of wind turbine permitting when I was at DEP in 2012, 2013. At that time, there were a number of projects coming online in Massachusetts. There were considerable issues with compliance enforcement. A number of problem projects, especially the ones on the coast, had come on, and at the time DEP did not have much understanding with wind turbine acoustics. It's something I've worked in for nearly a decade on a number of projects with developers and with DEP, so I know a pretty fair amount about it. At the time, there were a number of complaints in Massachusetts, but not all projects had complaints. The majority of the projects were actually well received. We did not have, it was maybe about, I'd say, a third to a quarter of them had significant noise complaint issues. But more importantly, what we found is that most of the complaints were near the larger turbines. We did not have complaints with small turbines. And this echoes what she said earlier about the situation in Vermont, where there were no complaints about small wind turbines. That was exactly what we had in Massachusetts. We did not have any complaints near turbines less than 1.5 megawatts. All the complaints were from the larger turbines. Small wind was not an area where we had any significant issues. And the reasons why this is true are a number of them. First, if you look at the studies of the, there's a problem with small wind turbines is there isn't that much data available about the dose response. The larger turbines is the Peterson Way papers, of course, are well known. And usually these papers are written about turbines which are at least 500 kilowatts. So in fact, the smaller turbines that we're discussing here, there's very little usable data about dose response. In fact, if anybody has it, I'd be glad to look at it. Because Greg Tachi and I were not able to locate accurate papers showing exactly how the small wind dose response occurred, because it was a problem which simply was not considered important enough for anybody to spend the time and money studying. So I was not able to locate accurate dose response papers for turbines under 100 kilowatts. And one of the other issues about dose response, which is true for larger turbines, and I think people who read the Peterson Way papers know this, is that when people are looking at turbines, there is a tendency with large turbines to use sound as a pretext for other issues. And this is especially true in places like rural Massachusetts and Vermont, where people don't want to look at them, and they use sound as a pretext for visual issues, or they didn't like the way the permitting process was done, or they felt they didn't get a good deal on the town didn't get paid enough. But people have a tendency with larger turbines to be annoyed by sound for other reasons. In other words, they don't like them anyway, they're predisposed to be against them for other reasons, and then they turn the turbines on and say, oh, see, I'm annoyed. That does not generally occur with small turbines, because small turbines simply don't have the other factors involved, visual, permitting issues, which cause you to be naturally predisposed against them. Now, another significant issue with small versus large turbines is the issue in terms of where you're putting the turbine. If we're putting a small wind turbine up, what you're generally going to do, you're going to put it at a farm or residential area. Well, what does that mean? It means you're putting it up on a relatively flat ground. All right, most farms are flat. You don't have a farm on top of the mountain. You have a farm where it's flat where you can farm. That's where you're going to put your turbine up. So what does that actually mean in terms of noise background? It means that when you have a small wind turbine that's been put up, and you have residents nearby, you're hearing wind. The wind is blowing at the turbine, but you also have wind blowing at the residents. So when you have a small turbine up, you usually typically have higher wind noise background. So as Steve pointed out in his presentation, the background makes a significant difference in the way people perceive it. So with small wind turbines, if they're on flat sites and people nearby, like you have here, you tendency to have a significant amount of masking background during operational conditions. Now with larger turbines, this is a picture of Sheffield. Take a look at what you got out there. You've got the turbines up at the top of the ridge, right? You've got the residents, as you can see some farms down below. Well, what happens under operational conditions? Well, if the wind's blowing if the residents are on the lee side of the mountain, you can have a situation where the wind's blowing 15 to 20 miles an hour or more at the top of the hill. but there's little or no wind at the bottom of the hill. So what happens then? You don't get masking background. And this happened in Massachusetts, a couple of locations, the Berkshires. We went out and measured the wind, the turbines were produced cranky away at the top. There was almost no masking background down below at all. So the point of it all is, the masking background issue with small turbines and large turbines is significantly different. Usually with small turbines, you usually have masking background of some type, just because the wind's blowing the turbine, it's blowing at the resonance too, but that's not always the case for large turbines. And in fact, some levels I measured at a farm in Vermont, there's my microphone out there by my car. This is in the winter. You can't really read that, but if you could, it would say that the levels were, I had that background levels of 35 to 40 decibels in the winter from the wind blowing. And that's comparable to the levels you're going to hear from a turbine at, say, 600 feet. So the point of it all is masking background for wind turbines, for small wind turbines, is clearly significantly higher. It's almost always a significant amount when the wind turbine is blowing, when the wind's blowing. Another difference between small turbines and large turbines is the issue of amplitude modulation. This is one that Steve brought up. And at least as DEP, we found this to be a very important matter, is that this is a consistent problem near the larger turbines. It's more prevalent at the side wind. You get the 4 decibels of peak-to-peak variation, even more. Here's a picture of amplitude modulation with large wind turbine, and you can see that the turbine going up and down, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It's significantly noticeable. Well, with small wind turbines, you have much lower levels of amplitude modulation because the blades are spinning a lot faster. They're spinning a lot faster, so the turbine up the actual amplitude modulation is significantly less, and the frequency of the amplitude modulation, the blade passage frequency, is typically significantly much higher. In fact, some of the very small wind turbines spin so loud they have almost no amplitude modulation at all. But some of the larger ones, the 1500 kilowatts, there is some of those. So it does go up and down some, but it's significantly less than what you get with the large turbines. So the actual perceived annoyance goes down significantly with smaller turbines. Now, a third major difference between small and large turbines is the issue of infrasound. I'm sorry, I can't. Yeah, that's for Facebook. I can't get something. Can you do that? Click that
It
off?
should just go away. You can click the little X's. Just
There we go. Well, that's.
Just click the down arrow.
Yeah, let's get down here. All right. No, this is not the presentation. Get back. There we go. All right. Yeah, there's something. All right. So that's like little Facebook stuff. There's issues with infrasound. It's become clear with large turbines, as Steve has pointed out, a number of other people have, that infrasound production from large turbines, clearly it does exist. It's clear that anecdotal evidence could be an issue. It's agreed that infrasound cannot be detected by the ear, but it may actually be, there are mechanisms by which it may be detectable by the inner ear, makes you feel queasy or gives you motion sickness or what have you, and it can penetrate walls and windows and couple the buildings. Well, this is what we get for large turbines, but with small turbines, it simply doesn't happen this way. The infrasound level, the whole frequency curve is shifted over into the higher frequencies. There's much lower levels of infrasound. There's the levels are at higher frequencies. It's more readily blocked by the buildings. And what also happens is that with small turbines, a large amount of the small turbine infrasound is really masked by the wind because the wind itself creates infrasound. There's actual background from the wind. So the infrasound from the small turbine is going to be more readily masked by the wind because you're getting continual wind masking background with small turbines. I am not aware of any potential reported infrasound-related effects from small turbines. It may have occurred. It's possible. I mean, there's hundreds of turbines that are out there in the country, but I am not aware of any. And certainly, if there are, it's much less than the case for the large wind turbines. It's something that I found to believe to be an issue. Some may have occurred, but I don't know of any. Now, another issue with small wind turbines is the issue in terms of the speeds at which the turbines operate. The small wind turbines typically run at at lower wind speeds for two reasons. First, they're close to the ground. Secondly, they're not located on ridges, they're located at farms, so they're not getting the high wind that you get on the ridges. So typically, a small wind turbine is going to be running at 5 meters per second versus maybe 7 to 8 meters per second for a larger turbine. Now, what this means is if you're going to permit the small wind turbine that's rated power, and that occurs at 11 to 12 meters per second, you're actually, under operational conditions, getting much lower sound production from the turbine than you're actually permitted. So, which means that there's a significantly lower time near the permitted sound levels than for large turbines. An examination of the Weill curve here shows about how this will work. I don't know if you can read this too well, but what this shows is that the actual total amount of wind, it peaks around 11 to 12 miles per hour. Well, what's the sound level being produced at the sound power level? This is for an XL, Berkey XL. You're getting 84 decibels of sound power production. You're getting a sound power level of 84 decibels at about, say, 12 miles per hour wind. Well, the rated power at 10 meters per second, 11 meters per second, is 94, which is 10 decibels higher than under typical wind operating conditions. So if you're going to permit the turbines at their peak rated sound power level, you're permitting a level which almost never actually occurs under operational conditions. You're permitting a level which is much, much higher than what you actually would hear under typical wind turbine operating conditions. And even under a case where the turbines were, say, operating at, say, 16 miles an hour, which would do more, less than 90% of the time, you're still 7 decibels lower than what you're getting from the peak, from the actual peak rated power. So the point of all this is, if you're going to permit small turbines at their peak rated power, that's not what you're actually hearing under most circumstances. At this particular turbine, the peak rated power would occur 0.2% of the time, which is less than half a day a year. So you can see then that it's important to realize you're not actually hearing the peak rated power from the turbines most of the time. Getting back to the issue of annoyance, as I stated earlier, one of the problems we've had is locating quality studies of wind turbine annoyance. Most of the wind turbine annoyance studies, if you see the one here to the left, is wind, are from medium to larger turbines. So it's very hard for us to come up with accurate levels of annoyance for small wind turbines because it hasn't been studied that carefully. And what we find is, if you look at the industry standard, which is the purple one, which is shifted well to the right, what you find is the small wind turbines they don't sound the same as large wind turbines, obviously, but they would be shifted somewhat closer to the industry level sound noise curve, which is for continuously operating equipment, which is considerably higher. Unfortunately, I simply don't have the data. We could not locate the data to come up with an accurate curve to show exactly how much the shift is. And if somebody has it, I'd certainly be glad to look at it, because I certainly think it would be very important to have that in order to come up to accurately establish the levels.
What are the X and Y axes?
One is the day-night sound and decibels, and the other is the percent highly annoyed, by the percent who are exposed or are highly annoyed by it.
Can I interject here?
Yes, sir.
There's a new term, it's LDN. That's a day-night weighting, and it differentiates the nighttime from the daytime by 10 dB. If you were to normalize that, in other words, take out the LDN and make it just a level, it would shift down 6 dB, those curves.
I appreciate that.
Matter of fact, Pedersen Way does track.
Yeah, that's right. And it would be very helpful. And I think this is the board. I think would probably, if anybody knows of an accurate dose response curve, and when they go to actually make the actual regulations, getting that I think would be very important, because we were not able to locate one we could rely on. So So in conclusion, then, close to conclusion, small turbine sound noise is not included in wind turbine noise studies. The sound characteristics are closer to continuously operating equipment than larger turbines because they spin faster, they don't have much amplitude modulation, they don't have the infrasound. So they're closer, they sound closer to continuously operating equipment than larger turbines. So that means that the sound curve, the actual noise curve, is going to be closer to continuously operating equipment than, it'll shift is closer to that continuously operating equipment. So what this means then, that the actual noise levels for small wind turbines are much higher than the 35 decibel proposed level. These 35 decibel levels are considered low even for large turbines, and for small turbines, they're much, much too low. All right. There's no evidence anywhere to support a 35 decibel limit for small wind turbines. Nothing. As far as I can tell, I haven't seen any noise studies, complaints, anything that supports that. It may be some evidence here, but I have not seen it anywhere. So what does this mean in terms of turbine setback distance? Well, for large turbines, the new regulations would require nearly 4,000 foot setbacks to meet the new standard of 35. That's for a single 2.5. For multiple 2.5s, it would be even more. If I had 4,500, 5,000, we start adding all the sound in. That was just for one turbine. For small turbines, you would require nearly 1,500 foot setbacks to meet the 35 decibel limit. And this is essentially, that means you have to have a farm more than half a mile square, and to put a turbine up. And that means that to put it right smack in the middle of the farm, not even at the highest wind point location, it'd be in the middle just to meet setback distances. This would become an effective ban on small wind turbines and small residences. With the 35 decibel level, you would not be able to put up anything, right? As far almost nothing. There might be a few locations here and there that were very far removed or very large farms. Somebody's house is in the middle of nowhere. You might be able to do it, but it'd be an effective ban on small wind turbines. The number we came up with, which is being conservative, which is also due to the fact that we don't have the detailed information we need to establish it, would be 42. And it could go as high as 45, but we're being conservative about it. The other guys are saying 45. We would obviously agree with that, but it shouldn't be any lower than 42. 42 would be the bottom limit, and because that's getting at the bottom of the large turbines. The limits in Maine, limits considered acceptable for large turbines. So 42 decibels would still be very conservative for small turbines, and you would be practically speaking about a 600 to 700 foot setback for that, and that's still a considerable setback. That's 2 football fields. That's a decent sized farm to get a small turbine in 42. But if some of the other turbine people want to weigh in, they might want to raise it as high as 45. We wouldn't object to that, but 42 would be the bottom you could go to get anything built. So, conclusions. The proposed noise regulations are very conservative for all wind turbines. Significantly different conditions indicate they are not appropriate for small wind. The background levels of difference, the sound production is different, the perception of the turbines due to the smaller size is different, the masking is different, the amplitude modulation is different, the infrasound the amplitude modulation is lower, infrasound is different. Small turbines have much less effect for a given sound level. The proposed regulations would be an effective ban on small wind in Vermont. A better level for small turbines, with minimum, will be 42 decibels day and night, and that's still conservative. And that's my presentation. Okay.
Ask a question about the difference in the small turbines in terms of the NRO and their ability to change operations.
Jason, want to answer that one?
Well, most small wind turbines, in other words, if you could afford them, are all fixed blade. All the turbines on the SWC website are all fixed blade. As I understand, the way that an NRO is going to be performed is to have a pitching blade that's going to be able to slow the RPM of the rotor down and therefore reduce the noise. And the turbines that are available for a Vermonter to buy today that are certified cannot do that. So you would basically be sending the entire industry back to redesign, rebuild, and recertify in order to do an NRO. I mean, we're all working as hard as we can on new technology, but as of today, that's your choices.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify about your presentation now. Mr. Quinn, I guess you just gave one, and do you have another one?
Yes,
you want
it's
to give?
Yeah, I have another one. You want to?
When you signed up for 35 minutes, you've used 21 or 22.
Okay.
Jason.
You
I'm
want-
going to give you the full 35.
Okay,
But
do you want to take a
not
lunch
more.
break, and then I can
That
start
was
after
scheduled
lunch?
for 12:35 to do the lunch break,
Yeah, we're
so
okay.
just keep
Okay.
going.
I copied you. I have a couple of.
Yes.
David Brown, Vermont Department of Health. For your presentation, can you tell me what your operating definition of small wind turbines is?
You know, that's a question that it seems to vary a bit. I think most people would agree that anything under 25 is considered small. I would tend to believe, based on my experience, that it would be under 100, that usually the turbines, the 50, 75, the 50 kilowatt, usually don't see the kind of sound issues with anything under 100. Some of the hundreds clearly have some problems. I would probably not include 100 in small wind.
So the generalizations that you were making, that would apply to wind turbines with less than 100?
Less than 100, yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Here you go, catch it.
That's the one.
That's you.
Okay, good.
Download you.
Okay, I'm Jason Day from Starwind Turbines, and we manufacture small turbines from 5 to 50 kilowatts for individual ownership. These would be turbines that would be truly distributed. They would be for going to a farmer's field or into somebody's backyard, somebody that wants to make their own energy for their house. And what I've noticed for the last several meetings that we've had in this work group is that everybody's been pretty much talking about large wind turbines and all of the data and the argument, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to step forward and identify that small wind turbines are not large wind turbines, and we want to emphasize what the differences are. So small wind turbines make less noise than large wind turbines, and you can check out the data sheets. I can give it to you later if you like. But you're going to typically see either if you measure it in sound power levels or sound pressure levels, you're going to find that small wind turbines are going to be quieter. They do not make the same low frequency and infrasound as large wind turbines. They're smaller mechanisms. They don't have step-up gearboxes. They don't have the amount of vibrations and low frequency sounds because they're spinning faster and the mechanisms are direct drive. They're on shorter towers and have smaller diameters. This means that the ground in the forest is going to absorb the noise, and the sound is not going to travel as far. And now obviously they're not going to have as much of a visual impact. The sound, okay, they'll be typically these are going to be located closer to neighboring residences. Low visual unlike what RUV pointed out. They don't necessarily have to be on ridge tops. They're going to be in the Champlain Valley. They're going to be in the Grand Isles. They're going to be on farms. They don't necessarily have to have high wind speeds in order to be feasible, in order to make usable energy. So therefore, it's going to be a great economic benefit for the average landowner to put up a small wind turbine on their properties and make their own electricity. And Vermont is special in that you can actually get paid cash We talked about the definitions of small wind in that, there's a definition out there that's less than 100 kilowatt, you see 50 kilowatt, you see, the AWIA 9.1 specifies 50 kilowatt as a small wind. Standard offer program in Vermont specifies it at 100 kilowatt. Okay, so here's typical difference. That's a Vestas V117. I think it's on top of some of these Vermont wind farms, and that's the Bergie down there at the bottom on a 100-foot tower. You can see the visual distance. You're going to find that if you get the data sheets, you're going to find that the tower heights are much higher, 450. Blade area is 384 feet versus 23 feet. It's a difference of 10,000 square meters versus 38 square meters. So the differences in the actual sound pressure, sound power coming out of a large turbine and a small turbine. I mean, I hear stories of people putting their hand on the wall and feeling vibrations and all sorts of things. That's not going to happen with a small wind turbine. It does not have that type of sound power. The differences you will find between that Vestas and the Bergie is almost 10 dB difference. Okay, so that makes a difference. That's why you need 4,000 feet for this large turbine and a Bergie. To make 45 decibels, you could probably make 45 decibels in 500 or 600 feet. Okay, so this is the difference. What you're going to find out in the world, we've all seen these turbines. There's the SkyStream, a Northern Power down the street makes 100 kilowatt. We're making turbines like this. You're going to see them close to houses. This is what they're designed for. You're going to see, and this is what AWIA 9.1 is all about, is that they specify it and they anticipate the use of a small wind turbine to start at 200 feet, and then you can go out farther from there. So what they do is they specify a rated power in dBA, which is sound pressure, not sound power. At that point, you can, as a rule of thumb, if you double the distance, the sound pressure in dBA will go down about 6 dB, and you can do an estimate that way. We're all using modern software, to show this in a graphical way, such as WinPro or DNV software, etc. And that's not too hard to do. But so you can see farms and houses, etc. This is what small wind turbines look like. And this is a certification data sheet out of SWCC's website. This is about the Bergie 10 kilowatt. And the reason I'm talking about the Bergie 10 kilowatt is it's the most popular wind turbine in the United States. And in Vermont, there are turbines down to 1 kilowatt, and there are turbines up to 65 kilowatt on the website. Okay, so you can see, with the point I want to make on this is that you can see the maximum noise level up there around 55 or 57. That's the maximum noise level. And if you go down in meters per second, it's somewhere, those are meters per second. It's somewhere around, you can convert meters per second to miles per hour. 12 meters per second is about 25 miles an hour. So you can see, we can come back to that.
You can see the background there too, by the way, and that's Texas, which is even lower than you have here in Vermont.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point. I want to point out this background noise.
Yeah, you have plenty of it.
That's, I know that site is grass. Yeah. This is the sound of grass. This is not trees. This is not houses. This is the sound of high grass. It's not even corn. This site is going to be making, when the Bergie is up there, making maximum sound at 55, 57. The background noise you can see is somewhere there around 45 decibels, etc. okay? In order to get, and I hear these stories about 18 decibels and 20 decibels of background noise. Yes, that can happen if you have absolutely no wind on a frozen day, okay? If you go out into any average Vermont woods, even in the wintertime when there's no leaves, okay, you cannot get, just average wind, 4 miles an hour breeze, 5 miles an hour breeze, you cannot get less than 40 decibels, 35 decibels of background noise. You can't, it won't happen. So what we're saying is, and I'm going to get back to this point, look at this data here, and this is grass, this is not trees. Now a deciduous tree with leaves on it will make 55 decibels of noise, 50, 55 decibels of noise in that high wind. Okay, so this is the same as Dr. Quinn's chart, only this is in sound pressure instead of sound power.
We actually want to take, we want to take this out.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Only one person can talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. What I want to show is, if you can see, this is the Weibull curve, which shows the probability of incidence. How often does this turbine? How often is the wind going to be at 11 miles an hour? You can see the peak. This curve is an average of 11 mile an hour peak, and it's showing. It's showing about 12% of the time. So the majority of the time up there is between 6 and 14 miles an hour. But if you look at 26 miles an hour, where the Berge makes its maximum sound, its maximum noise, you can see it's less than a fraction of a percent of the time. And this is, and when you calculate that out, 0.2% of the time up there between 24 and 25 miles an hour is somewhere around 16 hours out of 8,760 hours per year. This is what we're talking about. Okay, so you can see this is the list that was presented by REV of the same turbines. She represented and put the data up on the rated sound power. I went through and I marked down what the maximum sound power was on these turbines. And you can see it there. And right next to it there is the distances that you would be required to have in order to make 35 decibels. And that's probably very conservative. You probably should add 10% to that. We'll get back to that. Okay, so my customers ask me, how many acres do I need to install a wind turbine? And they say, is 5 acres enough? Is 10 acres enough? And I have to tell them that if you have a property and you have to maintain 1,300 feet, you need 155 acres to install a turbine, a Berge turbine. In order, if you were to have a house on every side around that turbine with a 100-foot buffer. This is, and so if you put that on, the Vermont landscape, you can see the property lines there of an example of houses that have long, slender property lines that go up the hill. In a practical application, that would make an excellent wind site for. There's the row of houses down there at the bottom of the hill, and you could where that turbine, that yellow dot, is at the top of the hill. So you would, it's a perfect place for a turbine. And there's your 155 acre square there. And then you would do your WindPro software. These are either this software or the software by DNV. These are the worldwide recognized software programs to model. You would see the yellow line at the outside there would show you 1,300 feet, and that's the 35 decibel line. The pink dot on the side there is the house. So this turbine could potentially meet the sound pressure. But if you look at the setback distances, you have your 2 times the top of the blade. So this would be automatically disqualified because this property is only 310 feet wide, and the top of the blade of the turbine could be 200, 250 feet. So what we're requesting is you look at each case individually and not automatically eliminate because of a arbitrary setback limit. We talked about the sound environment. This is an example. And here again, when I hear stories about 27 dB of background noise, or we were at the Bennington meeting and a gentleman talked about, or people talked about 18 decibels of background noise. Well, okay, it's possible to happen, but when that happens, a small wind turbine, you can see it off there on the right, is in the same neighborhood, and therefore it's going to have zero sound output at that particular time, if you're talking about the same time. It's not the big turbine up the hill that could be getting the high wind and potentially could be making high noise, that's highest maximum noise at that point when the terrain is blocking the wind, and therefore you have low, and therefore blocking any background noise from happening. The small wind turbine is going to be in the same vicinity, and it's going to have the same, it's going to be making low noise when there's low background noise, and when the background noise of trees and grass, etc., come up, for that small percentage of the time, the small wind turbine then will make its maximum noise. And then we'll get into that scenario. Okay, so things to consider. The small wind turbines make their maximum noise when the wind is high. Okay, this is 15 to 25 miles an hour. At that time, a neighbor will likely go inside and shut his or her windows at night. So what we're saying is that when you're outside and it's 6 or 8 miles an hour, that's going to blow your hat off. Okay. And if the wind goes up to 11 miles an hour, you're going to cancel your picnic, you're going to fold up everything, you're going to go inside. At 15 miles an hour, your trash can is going to go blowing down the street. At 20 to 25 miles an hour, which is a fraction of the time, you're in a windstorm. And we all know what that sounds like when you go inside. You're not, and as I understand, this ordinance is to protect people so they can get their sleep. Okay? Well, in a windstorm, most people are going to shut the window. Okay? And when you shut the window, that's number 2, most likely people are going to shut their window in the wintertime, which is 6 to 8 months of the year. So we're talking about summertime. Now, when you go inside, and we've had many discussions here, many different opinions of background noise, and I've read the letters. One fellow that was putting a diesel tractor outside the window and measuring only a 6 dB difference from a diesel engine. Okay, and then other data was showing 25 dBA difference. Okay, so we're going to average 12, 15, maybe fair. I think I heard the gentleman say 5 decibels for an open window. Okay, so when you close that window, you're going to get 15 decibels of noise attenuation or masking. So, okay, so now when you have, okay, so point number 4, small wind turbines do not have the flow frequency and infrasound. They just don't. Nobody has reported any complaints of such. That's because it doesn't exist. And this is why we at 9.1 and SWCC, they don't test it, because it's not a problem. Okay, they start testing octaves and low frequency sounds in IC 61400-11, which was designed to test large wind turbines. They came up with a WEA 9.1 because they knew that small wind turbines could not meet or could not exist with IEC 61400-11. And be feasible.
5 minutes over your time now, so you wrap up.
Okay. Okay, we went over NRO.
Okay, it's about done. We said a lot, Troy, just get that. Yeah,
Okay, so what I'm saying is that the scenario of a turbine, you go in a high wind, which makes it sound 16 hours out of the year. The neighbor is going to go inside, close the windows, whether it's wintertime or whether it's just high. The house is going to provide 16 dBA of sound attenuation, and the net sound will be less than the 30 dBA inside as required. Also, that does not take into account any background noise that's going to be happening during that windstorm. And we're recommending, conclusion, we're recommending 42 dBA at minimum, okay, for night and day, and requiring that not be subject to IEC 61400-11, but OWIA 9.1, and that there not be any setback limit in Rule 5.100 or 5.700. We're recommending 1.1 times the top of the blade, and then review it on a case-by-case basis, based on visual impact or whatever during the CPG process. And that's it.
So I think what we'd like to do is take our lunch break now, then we come back, we'll have questions. We'll have questions for you when we come back.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So we'll come back at 1:35.